I could press record.
Got it. We're good. Okay, so we're back with another episode of A Woman Full of Soul.
Wait a second, Mary, it's not recording. Is it?
On my end, it says recording.
It does. Okay.
There it goes. So we're back with the rest of our episode with Sandra Kim on what it means to be a woman full of soul. And she's actually going to talk a little bit more about how she identifies as a woman of color. She's going to add a little bit more to what she was saying before about that.
So if any of you who are listening had listened to the previous things that I had said, I had mentioned a little bit about my background. I identify as Korean American, female, hetero, and growing up, my mother and father were immigrants. They came in the 1960s to go to college in the US. They actually met in Chicago. And then they went out to California, where I'm assuming they probably experienced quite a bit of racism, being one of the only Asian families in Orange County, California. So they decided not to teach us Korean and to only English for fear of us having an accent. And my mother encouraged us to also get eye surgery so we can look more white and Caucasian and to brighten our skin. And it was all really to look more white because we were considered the other. And my mother really wanted to assimilate into the culture, which, you know, makes sense to her. That's what fitting in was, to do all the rituals of white Caucasian American culture, Christmas, 16th birthday party, Thanksgiving, New Year's, all of that were very much brought up in the white tradition. But at the same time, you know, I think I identify as a person of color because I look very Asian from the outside. Even other Asians say, like, you look so Korean. And when you assimilate, there's almost a denial of culture. And it's a little bit sad that I don't speak Korean, and other Koreans who are more steeped in tradition are very like, why don't you speak Korean? It's unfortunate. So I was brought up to feel very white, but in college, when I looked in the mirror, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm not white, I'm Asian. And I think growing up, that was reflected in how other people perceived me. There were, I guess you would label them as skinheads in my high school, and they would always, in my elementary school, middle school, and high school, and they would always steal my Halloween candy. That was very frequent, and they would say, go back to your own country, or, you know, was it Chinese, Japanese, dirty knees, look at these, and all of these stuff. So, you know, the microaggression and racism that I experienced are on, I would just say on a, you know, not as aggressive scale as some other people of color experience. But I think because Asian Americans have a work ethic, not only education first and work really hard, to the point of no self-care, they have been able to achieve, certain Asian cultures have been able to achieve. So they've been able to blend in, just like my mother, assimilate into white culture. So
Did she have any of the surgeries that she wanted you to have? Did
I'm not,
she use the creams and all that?
I'm not sure she'll be listening to this, but
I don't have to share it on your page.
so in any case, my mother is amazing. When you speak to her, she actually, if there were no image of her, she sounds like she's from America. There is no trace of an accent. And yeah, but otherwise, I definitely identify as a person of color. And when I went to college, I was surrounded by way more Asian Americans, got more in touch with my identity as a Christian Asian American, where I wasn't as teased as much because there were so many of us Asians at UCLA. But when you talk about, you know, Asians, they also have suffered, you know, with internment camps. Mary, you
Oh,
and I talked
definitely.
about that,
Yeah.
the Chinese Exclusion Act. And one particular moment I remember was I was at Harvard Graduate School, and I was in a person of color meeting, and someone turned to me and they said, Asians are not people of color, you're basically white. So even within people of color, there's this othering and isolation going on. But yes, there is privilege, and I want to say that I'm very aware of my privilege, and I'm very grateful, and I'm continually feel blessed. At the same time, being a woman of color, there's these like double negatives, right?
Yeah,
And the,
I actually do have something to say about that too. And my experience is a little bit different than yours in that I am white. I do identify as white. I've taken a lot of classes in Black adolescent and psychological development in college. And I met, throughout going through, to school and everything, and in college, I met people of different ethnic backgrounds. And when I got to so there was always that because you're white, you have more money mindset. And you know what? Honestly, in my family's case, that was not the case at all. Like my grandparents had funding, my father did not, right? So, and we were raised on very little. So when I got to college, there was a large just like you, there were clubs that you could join: Muslim Student Association, Christian Association, People of Color, Asian, I don't remember what they called it, Asian Association or something like that. Yeah. So, but I think they probably had another word somewhere in the middle. And they even had smaller groups than that. Like they had their little groups, I would say. And I went for interreligious dialogue reasons. I went to the Muslim Student Association meetings, and I had friends who were Muslim or identified as brown. Okay. And the way I was taught was that all immigrants, pretty much all immigrants, do not have money, right? That's kind of what was brought to me growing up. I don't know why. I don't know why, but that's the mindset I was sent into college with. That's all I know. And when I got to college, I was like, this is not the case. Like these people are immigrants and they have more money than I do. There's no way. And I'm not saying that. I mean, I went to upstate New York where it's very liberal up there. But this is where they had like affirmative action, equal opportunity, right? They had major programs in place so that they could get different people in and provide them with an education. But then we also had a major population come in from Manhattan and New York City. And so although some of those families were immigrant families, some of them were not, right? So there was where you're where they where the people in your group thought that you had money and were rich because of Asian background. Um, I guess you would say it wasn't the same, but it kind of was when no, it was like a reversal. When I walked into college, I was like, anyone who is not white does not, people that have money are mostly white, and that does not include me. I'm white, but I don't have money. So it took me a little bit to redirect my mindset and figure that out and to really work that out in my mind. And to piggyback off the other thing that you were saying about the internment camps, even now, like for years and years, I've already over and over again, same thing, advocated for immigrant populations, advocated for detention camps, I think is what they're called now. I don't know what they're called. I'm pretty sure it's detention camps, but then some other news sources labeled something else. Advocated and advocated that they need to be closed. They are not sanitary, they are not healthy, they are not good for the immigrant population. The immigrant population, when they come over, needs to have a specific dwelling space to go to. They deserve to have a dwelling space, right? So I fully understand in that regard what you're referring to. I'm gonna be quiet now because I just said a lot. But
yeah, I there were several things that you were saying I wanted to respond to. Um, there's also the model minority myth with Asians and Asian Americans that we all tend to be straight A's at math and
yeah,
science. And I think the model minority myth is there for a reason, but I think whenever you start to generalize a population, it gets dangerous and sticky.
yeah,
And I am by far not good at math and science. So that's a myth that needs to continually be busted. There's also the for myself, the Asian lotus blossom, and that all Asian women are good at sex. Like that's
Okay.
one that's very prevalent, and that I got when I was living abroad in Germany for 5 years. A lot of those people living in the town would say like, "Oh, but you're good at sex." So there's also
Wait,
that.
is that even a like? Oh my God.
Yeah, and so there's an object.
Context? Was it appropriate when they said it? Not
No,
appropriate? I'm assuming it was not
it
appropriate
was
at all.
at the train station and they were talking to
Yeah.
me, hey, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Oh
And
my
they said,
gosh.
isn't Bruce Lee talk like that? What does it mean? And so there's also that, right? The objectification
So inappropriate.
of the
Yeah.
Asian lotus blossom who will be passive, subservient, overly accommodating, and serve the man's every need. And so I'm working against that as well. So oftentimes I get comments, oh, like, oh, I love your eyes and the way that you squat, or, like, or how flexible you are.
Well, they may mean that.
Anyways,
It depends.
when you
You're
know
doing fitness.
that there is like a sexual innuendo with
I
a
know. I
male,
know. I
when
know. It's disgusting. I know.
so that's another why I definitely identify as a minority person of color.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Girl.
think I know, Mary, you had asked me to also answer the second question, and
Yeah.
just for lieu of time, she had asked about what is a woman full of soul, and I think I gave a pretty meaty, wordy answer in our previous recording. But I do feel like it's a woman who, hmm, yeah, who knows herself, but a woman who knows herself comes from a family or a family, or just someone who really loves her, either as a child. In psychology, we talk about good enough mothering. It's been
Hmm.
reworded as good enough parenting, and that's basically saying if as a child you were traumatized, your parents were absent or overbearing, that the love can be remedied by someone who can really love you the way you needed to be loved as a small child.
Yeah.
So I think when particularly for women, if that is, if there is some sort of, I guess, overbearing love like that, I mean, not overbearing, that's not the correct word to use, but if there's some sort of true genuine love from someone, can then a woman become more of a woman of soul and be comfortable in soul searching herself, and knowing herself? Because soul is really, it's spirit, it's heart,
Yeah.
combined with mind and intellect. But that, so really beginning to know yourself. And I'm just so privileged and blessed that I have an incredible set of parents who are both my role models when you ask that question. And likewise, the church, growing up as a Christian, also provided such a strong foundation, and also a purpose in my life as to why I do what I do. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah. In our previous session, you had said also that it's a woman who has boundaries and sets those boundaries herself. I think you said sets them herself. Can you explain a little bit more about that and what you like, or how women do that more effectively?
Definitely. I mean, I think a hot topic right now, just to pull it out even further, is self-care.
Hmm.
Leisure time. That's another way to look at it, but people don't like that term, leisure time. Self-care is a more acceptable way, and learning to be able to self-care means self-compassion and self-love. And in order to be self-compassionate and love yourself means to be setting boundaries. And I think oftentimes in the female culture, because of historically we've been there to provide for the family, we've been there to think about everyone's needs before our own, this
Hmm.
maternal instinct that we're all supposed to have, right? And I you can see why that's been perpetuated. But now I think as women's rights and women's needs are becoming more and more highlighted, the Me Too movement, women are now a little bit more apt to speak up. I
Mhm.
think it's so important to self-care. And I think it's different now in our generation because the access to social media and all of that, it's so easy to get all consumed in all different directions. So the boundary, how can a woman set boundaries? It's you really have to practice to say no. And in fact, when you set boundaries and when you say no, you're actually more respected. If you think about the woman who always said, oh, I'm so sorry, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, was that my fault? I apologize. Like it weakens their character. But for a woman to know when to say I'm sorry,
Right. Yeah.
that is so powerful. Like you don't have to be sorry just because, I don't know, your email was too long, or I don't know, something tipped over on your chair or
Yeah.
whatever. I think that yeah, so
Or
there,
sorry to have to ask a question. I've seen that a lot too in younger women
yeah,
at the university. Granted, they're probably freshmen and they're coming in and they're like, I'm sorry to ask a stupid question. And I'm like, there are no stupid questions. A
yeah.
question is a question.
And you're and
Be confident in your question.
if it's a sorry, what is it? It's both. They accept both male and female and gender fluid people. Then when you add one man, because I worked at Wellesley College, you add one guy, all the women pull back. One guy in a sea of like 50 women, all the women start to pull back. But if
They
women,
shouldn't. They shouldn't.
right, but in women's education, it was a chance for women to finally speak up and be more assertive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
interesting, just adding one guy into the picture changes the scope of everything. And the female would be more apt to say, like, I'm sorry to say this, you shouldn't be sorry. You have every human right to speak your mind, but we've been so,
Conditioned. We've really been conditioned. In
yeah,
our culture, we have been
privacy.
conditioned.
Yeah.
And there are, the one thing I will say is that also present here in the United States, and I think internationally in other cultures, other locations too, there are some men who um, reaffirm women in that, and them setting boundaries, and them
Mm,
trusting themselves to do that, and them knowing themselves enough to be able to do that,
mm,
um,
mm,
and respect those
mm. That's
too.
such a good point. I
So,
I think, and that's there's a trend now to focus on men's psychology, to focus on men's mental health in order to debunk their own biases of what a healthy relationship looks like. So once the men get support, they can better support women. That's what you're talking about, right?
I don't know. What I'm saying is that, so I know many different categories of men. I'll say that. Married men, single men, priests, brothers, whatever, they're all different ethnic backgrounds. But what I've seen is that there are some men who expect women to go into that subservient, submissive role, right?
Because their mothers did it.
Because their mothers did it, but then also they just think it's okay and acceptable and that the world revolves around them. That's just, some guys really do think that way. I don't know why, I don't know how, but they do. And then there's other men who are like, I mean, I know it's part of our culture and that's how it happened, but how it still exists, I don't know. But but then there's other men who are very different from that, and they want women to set boundaries for themselves. They don't want to be a man who has to tell a woman how to set boundaries for herself or show her how. Although there's also, these same men can also, like if they see you not setting them, like if you're over giving of yourself to everyone all the time and you're having difficulty saying no, they would very easily tell you you need to say no. They wouldn't tell you keep giving, you know? It's a different, it's a different way of, um, it's a mindset shift for men. that they've gone through, I think, or they've been raised in a different way, maybe. I don't know. But um,
Yeah, I like how you pointed out that there are some men who actually are trying to break the
the
generation.
mold, yeah. And they're trying to show other men that it's good to do that and it's healthy to do that too, which, to go back to what you were saying about being supported, they're actually supporting women doing that. And not, how do I want to word it? I'm just gonna, so my example is, the person that I'm in love with. When I came back from World Youth Day, my body was literally falling apart. Like I had to rest. But I was going through a major life change at that time too. I was moving, I was doing all this other stuff. And he encouraged me to rest, even though I knew I had all these other things I had to do. And I had set boundaries for myself, but I still felt that push, right, from society to go, go, go and wear yourself out, pretty much. And he gave me permission to rest.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's not that I needed his permission to rest. It wasn't that. He gave me the permission to give myself permission to rest and to say no to the other thing, like you were saying. But then also, I mean, he knew I had boundaries for myself. He knew that I was already somebody who wouldn't like do certain things, or I don't know how to word it. So my boundaries were already there, but because of the specific situation I was in at that time and all the things that were changing, um, he he was well enough, not just well enough, there isn't a word I can think of for it, but um, he knew exactly what to say and what to have me do, and it was to rest.
Wow.
Um, Even when I wasn't listening to my own body about that, and I felt the pressure from the outside world telling me I had to go, go, go because of the life situations I was going through.
And I have to say, behind that behavior and wellness and stability that you found in him is probably a really aware, self-aware mom and a very
Or sister, he does have sisters, so I know
a
he
mother,
learned
yeah,
a lot from them.
a
Yeah,
mother figure behind that, yeah,
and the mother.
and as a bonus, probably if possible, a great father figure. But I feel like behind every great man is the woman behind him. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, and the point of me saying that is that it, and I'm sure your spouse, your partner, is this way for you too. You already have those boundaries for yourself. You have those boundaries. You know how to say no. Sometimes you may have difficulty saying no sometimes, or fully setting those boundaries, but not even just the boundaries. You know yourself very well. I get the impression that you know yourself really well, but I'm sure he's also there when you might falter. You're like, oh, I don't know, where he has that spark and holds up that sign and he's like, yeah, I don't know, I don't think so. I think what you're really, but not saying it in a condescending way, not saying it in a controlling way, not saying it in a way to demean you or belittle you or objectify you or any of those other things that we've just talked about, but in a way to uplift you, to to have you see um, the beauty in whatever it is that you need to do, or the beauty in yourself to be able to do it, right?
Yeah. I could speak volumes on my partner, my husband, but just your love and the guy you just described is definitely my husband too. But that's because his mother is extraordinary. I've never met a woman like her. So, but I've just been really lucky. I think finding a right love is partially luck, and it's
Yeah.
timing, and it's knowing yourself.
What you said that his mother is extraordinary. What do you find extraordinary about her? What it would you say that is the woman full of soul that you just described?
She has the fruits of the spirit.
Yeah.
Patience of an angel, love, faith, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, forgive. Yeah. I don't know how she got, maybe she just got lucky.
It takes work. There's no luck in that.
So,
Those fruits develop.
I'm so blessed to have a mother-in-law with whom she's just amazing, fantastic. She's amazing. Yeah.
It's exciting to hear. It's exciting because her ethnic background is very different than yours also.
Yeah.
Very different, but good. But very good. If there was anything else that you'd want to tell every woman that you haven't yet said, what would it be? Is there anything else? You're like, please go vote. I can't say that because everybody already voted.
Please take a break and engage in self-care, whatever that is. If it's like setting boundaries, communicating with family, or distancing yourself from family, or being kinder to your body, or going to a spa, whatever self-care means to you, just engage and just rest. Please.
You're like, please. I've
Yeah.
already done that. Don't worry. She can point the finger at me all she wants. I'm doing much better.
Anything for anyone.
But I think what you just said really aligns with everything that we've talked about, especially during COVID. It's really important. There are so many roles that women have been given right now during COVID, and we had them before, but they probably have grown in many ways we didn't know about before we went into lockdown or before we went through this or that or whatever during COVID. And so self-care is really, really important. And I also think that COVID helps redefine what that looks like for you for better ways forward in the future for your life when COVID isn't present. So you're learning things now that on better self-care now, but then also better all the other things too. So that when COVID is over, you're existing in a new way and being in a new way. There's a lot of growth in it, good growth in it.
Tough. Without before learning lessons, we have to break first.
Yeah.
But overall, if you have small children or even bigger children and you're at ends with, you need to walk away. Just turn around and walk away.
Oh yeah.
Because it's gonna affect you mentally in a very negative way. So just walk away. Someone else or the kids, I don't know, just make sure the kids are safe, but walk away just for like 30 seconds.
Yeah, and take time for yourself because that's really,
if possible, if that's a possibility, if you can find a caretaker.
or set aside a certain time each night or in the morning for yourself too. That works too. Because I know when the boys were smaller, even if they were here, it'd be the same cycle. I always tried to create a space in the morning for myself and a space in the evening.
Mm-hmm. If
To be
that's
able,
possible. If your
yeah.
child isn't colic, if you have a baby who's colic, then that's hard.
Well, my babies were up all the time, but I still, when they went to sleep at some point, I made sure to take that time and just give to myself because if you don't give to yourself, you don't have anything to give back to your child.
Yeah, that's the concept of self-care.
That's the thing. Yeah.
It's the
So,
airplane oxygen analogy. When you're on an airplane, it always says, please put your oxygen mask on first before putting it on a child's. Because what good are you if you're dead?
and it's not, yeah, it's not selfish at all. Yep.
Yes.
Well, thank you for explaining more and for defining what you think a woman full of soul looks like for you and where you see that present in your own life, in yourself, and in the people around you. It's been great talking to you and catching up, but also hearing your part of your story and journey and you being so open about that. I'm excited about hearing it, even though it's been horrible. I'm happy that you shared it because there's other women that have felt the same way you have and haven't said anything. And so now when they hear your interview, they're going to be like, she's right. Now I can actually talk about this. It's okay to actually talk about this. because a lot of women don't talk about
Mm.
what they've gone through identifying as a woman of color or an Asian minority or any of those things that you brought up.
Yeah,
So
talk therapy. It's
it's really good.
yeah.
Be excited to share it.
Well, thank you, Mary, too.
You.
We have a nice banter.
Not really banter. It's just different views, different perspectives. They're not even views. They're just different
Or
perspectives
nice
on the
fluidity.
same,
Nice fluidity to our conversation.
yeah, on the same topic,
All
right,
right.
and learning. So I wish you the best at your next meeting. I know you are always double booked. You're like, I'm double booked, double booked.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
For thank you for your well wishes, and you as well, of course.
Stay safe there, and I will touch base with you later via
Okay.
messenger to
Okay.
catch up and check out what your plan is post-election.
Sounds good. I
All
want to.
right. I'll talk to you later.
Bye, Mary. Are we gonna really hang
Ciao.
out?
Bye.
Are you?